Welcome to Beyond Belief. George Norrie with you with our special guest, Tom Campbell. Now, who is Tom Campbell? He's a very serious explorer of the frontiers of reality, the mind, consciousness, and psychic phenomena. He's been doing it for more than 40 years. Tom, welcome to Beyond Belief.
Thank you, George. Glad
40
to be here.
years you've been doing this?
40 years.
How did this start for you?
Well, I was in graduate school, working on my PhD, and I saw a notice that said, learn how to meditate, special for students, $25. That's where it started. I paid my $25 because I wanted to get by on less sleep. Graduate students tend to work long hours, particularly in experimental physics like I was in. So that started me, and within 2 months, I found out I could debug my software in a meditation state much faster and much more effectively than I could actually looking at the printout.
So that $25 was worth it.
It was worth it, and it opened up a whole new reality for me. Because before, like most physicists, if you can't measure it, it's not real or it's irrelevant. And at that point, that was nothing I could measure, but it was real because it was my software that was being debugged, and it worked.
Did you end up getting the PhD in physics?
I did not get the PhD. I did get a PhD education. I finished the thesis and did all of that, but I was needed elsewhere, and my major professor wanted me to do another paper after the first one. So I declined and went out and started my life.
And as you started your life, you started talking about in investigating consciousness. What did you uncover?
Well, actually what happened is that just after I graduated and took a job, I ran into Bob Monroe. And Bob Monroe had just built a building for studying consciousness, but he didn't have any scientists.
Expert in out-of-body experiences.
Expert. So I agreed to be one of his scientists for free if he would teach me what he knew. So I spent the next 5, 6, 7 years spending as much as 20 hours a week with Bob Monroe in his lab, and I was building equipment and I was doing experiments with other people, but I also was an experiment myself. So Bob taught me how to go out of body on demand and how to make that so stable that I could do experiments there. I could do research there. Change one variable, do it again. See if you get the same results. Change another variable, do it again. So on. And doing that for about 35 years, I thought I understood how it worked. So then I wrote a book about consciousness. The My Big Toe book has really started out as a theory of consciousness. And being a physicist, I should have picked up on it earlier because I knew consciousness was fundamental, the things I learned there. But about 2 years after I published these books, I realized that the same concepts, the same ideas that explained consciousness also explained quantum mechanics, and that I could actually derive quantum mechanics from consciousness theory. And then I thought a little bit, and I could derive relativity as well. So I started looking around for all the paradoxes in physics, things that weren't answered, things that we know were true because of experiments.
But they were all tied together.
We had no idea. So I could understand all of those paradoxes with this model. So then I started moving it into the physics as well. So it's a model that describes everything objective and everything subjective at the same time.
When I was younger, I picked up Bob Monroe's book, Journeys Out of the Body, and was fascinated by his work with astral projection.
Yes.
Are you able to astral project at will?
Sure. Yeah, I've been able to do that since probably being 2 years with Bob Monroe.
What a gift.
Matter of fact, if you look at Bob's second book, which was Far Journeys, you will find physicist TC is one of the...
You're the guy.
I'm the guy.
Interesting. Virtual reality, what is that? Well, give me a definition of that.
Okay. Virtual reality goes by a lot of different names, and the one that scientists use is information-based. It's an information-based reality. That's the same thing as saying it's a computed reality. That's the same as saying it's a simulated reality, it's a simulation, or a virtual reality. In other words, all the things we see are and feel and hear and so on are information. And that's not too hard to understand because our senses, we have 5 senses and they all gather information. And our reality is how we interpret that sense data.
We live in a virtual reality world, they say.
Yes.
Is that real or is it made up?
That's real. That we live in a virtual reality is the best, the best metaphor, or the best assumption, the best model that we have now of reality. Quantum mechanics and many physicists, particularly the younger physicists that are coming up today, believe that this is an information-based reality, because that's what quantum physics tells us. That's what relativity tells us.
Living in a virtual reality world is interesting, but I have always thought of virtual reality as you have goggles on and you're looking at a video and you're in the video. That's not exactly what you're talking about, is it?
No, but it's close. If we talk about a virtual reality game, okay, we play virtual reality like World of Warcraft or The Sims. It's more like that. But when you put on the goggles, you're actually a participant in that virtual reality. Okay, so now we take two of those and put them together, and we have our physical bodies. The physical world is the virtual reality. So our body is the avatar. We are consciousness, and as consciousness, we're the player of that avatar. We make all the choices.
Interesting. Greg Braden, on his Gaia series, Missing Links, talked about a simulated world.
Mm-hmm. The characteristics of a simulated world. A simulation has a place where it begins, a definite beginning, and it has a place where it ends. And what happens in between that beginning and that ending is based on a mathematic algorithm, a rhythm of cycles in patterns that repeat again and again and again on different scales. In a simulation, there are rules that govern the simulation, and the idea is that as the people in the simulation become more familiar with the environment, as they learn those rules, life gets better. They improve with practice. In a simulation, users have access to another reality that is not within the simulation. In the simulation, the users always have access to an external reality that they can tap into for guidance if they get into trouble or if they need clarification. They always have the ability to communicate beyond the simulation itself. That's going to be really important in just a few minutes. And in a simulation, as I've just mentioned, the user cannot tell the simulation from the real world. All right, so these are the characteristics of a modern simulation as we know it today, as we use them today typically. Now, with this in mind, let's go back and look at what our most ancient and cherished spiritual traditions from a number of different religions tell us about the world that we live in. Is it possible that thousands of years ago, our ancestors were trying to inform us in a language of their time, something that they understood that we are only beginning to awaken to the possibility of happening in our lives, that we are actually in an artificial world, a temporary world that has a beginning and an end, that we're learning something here, and that we have access to an external guidance when we need that access.
It's kind of scary, Tom, thinking that we live in a virtual reality world. To me it is. To you, probably not.
No, what do you find scary about it,
Well,
George?
just the unknown, the fact that it may not be as real as we think, or if it is real, it's not what I expected.
Well, that brings us to the definition of what's real. And I would say that there is nothing more real than information. Information is as real as it gets.
I mean, are we really here together right now? Or is
Absolutely.
that just a figment of somebody's imagination?
No, we are here now. It's not a figment of somebody's imagination. Virtual reality it's not a fake reality. It's reality. It's not like there's the virtual reality, then there's the real reality. But the thing that we just heard, I can put that in a little different terms that'll maybe answer your question or make you feel a little better about it.
All right.
Think of it like the World of Warcraft, like a virtual reality game, okay? And we are the player. We, consciousness, are the player. So when you're the player, you make all the choices for your avatar, okay? But the player And the computer that serves the game can't be inside the virtual reality. They have to be outside the virtual reality.
Sure.
And if they're outside the virtual reality, then they have to be non-physical from the viewpoint of inside the virtual reality. So see, that's what Greg was saying, that we're consciousness, therefore we're non-physical, we're outside of the virtual reality, but we're making the choices of the avatars. So as consciousness, we can connect to all the rest of consciousness, all the information that's out there. That's what Greg was talking about. There's another outside source that you also can get help and guidance from and find information there. So as consciousness, we're not limited to just this virtual reality. We're also players in the larger consciousness system.
Are we in the real world or are we in the virtual world?
The virtual world is our physical universe. The whole universe, that's the virtual world. The real world is the world of consciousness. That's fundamental. The virtual world is a product, something generated within consciousness. It's just information.
Do we overreact with virtual reality?
Well, a lot of people do. When they hear that this is a virtual reality, or they hear somebody say that, they have the idea that, oh, it isn't the real reality. It's a fake reality. It doesn't matter if this is a virtual reality, then it doesn't matter what I do because it's just a virtual reality.
It's not the real thing.
It's not the real thing. And they have that reaction to it, but that is because they are used to thinking of things as physical being real. This physical reality is the real reality, and if we're in some made-up virtual reality, then what difference does it make what I do? Well, it makes all the difference in the world what you do. We're consciousness, we're the players of these avatars, and we have a job. We are evolving. Consciousness is an evolving thing. And the way consciousness evolves, in technical terms, is toward lower entropy. In non-technical terms, it's toward caring, toward empathy, toward love. That's how consciousness evolves. And it's our job as pieces of consciousness, to evolve. That's what consciousness does. So as we evolve, we have to grow up, become caring, become less self-centered, more about other, less about ourselves. And that's our mission here. And we do that by the choices we make. So all these little choices we make are critical. They either help us evolve or they help us de-evolve.
But it's our choice.
It's our choice. Yes. So these choices are very important. It's not like, well, then I can do anything. Well, you might do anything, but you may de-evolve rather than evolve. And if you continue to de-evolve, then you become nothing. You de-evolve and become less and less. You evolve, you become more.
Tom, you've heard of the Akashic Records.
Yes.
What are they, in your opinion?
Well, the Akashic Records are a database. It's information in a database. And in my theory, that database has to exist as part of the mechanics of creating the virtual reality. So when you look at the virtual reality and how it has to work, then that database is an essential and necessary part of it. So those Akashic Records maintain a history of everything that has happened, plus everything that could have happened, and the probability that it could have happened. There's also in there everything that is possible to happen in the future, that might happen, and the probability that it actually will happen.
Bill Foss is an expert on the Akashic Records and was with me on a previous Beyond Belief show.
The Akashic Records is sort of like God's library in the higher dimensions surrounding the planet, where your soul records are stored. So everybody, you and I, and everybody else on the planet, 6 billion people plus, right now, has a book of life. So it's an energetic, etheric book of life.
The good and the bad.
Yes,
right?
all of your life experiences from all of your lifetimes, past, present, future.
So if you've had 20 different lives, reincarnated lives, they're all in that record?
Exactly, or 20,000.
Or 20,000. So when you die, does somebody open up that book and do a review of what you've done?
You do. You do, and there are special teachers there there are teachers and keepers of the records that are in this library or this and school where God, sometimes the archangels, sometimes family members, whatever is perfect for the individual. They're taken in you look at your lifetime, basically. You look at your most current lifetime, and you get to see what all of your missed opportunities were, your resentments, things you need to work on, and your triumphs, the things that you've accomplished. And because you're in the higher, in the higher dimensions at that time, you're able to see beyond the moment. You're able to look at the past, and you see how this lifetime correlates to your other lifetimes.
Are we, as the authors of the Akashic Records, constantly putting information into it?
Well, yes. As we make choices, then those choices that we make are recorded. And the things that happen in the virtual reality, all the action that takes place in the virtual reality that's based on the choices that the players make, is then recorded. So we have that, which would be in the past, but we also have a probable future as well. There is free will. The future's not a done deal, but it's probability. Some things are more probable than others.
How does that affect, let's say, reincarnation? In that clip, we've talked about 20 lives or 20,000 lives. How does that affect that?
Well, I might add that in my model, I didn't start out with things like Akashic Records and reincarnation and then try to explain them with a scientific model. It went the other way around. I'm a physicist. I started with physics and understanding, the nature of reality and nature of consciousness. And these things like the Akashic Records and reincarnation turned out to be a logical necessity in the model. So if the model was going to work and actually explain everything in the objective and subjective worlds, then these things had to be a logical part of it. So I came at it from the opposite direction. The idea of reincarnation is necessary because our mission, as I said, is to become love, to let go of fear, let go of self-focus and self-centeredness. And that isn't an easy thing to do. That's something that means you have to change yourself. You have to change who you are. You have to change the way you see the world. And that takes iteration. Learning something like that isn't going to happen in one giant step. It has to happen in a series of experiences. So yes, the reincarnation then is something that is part of that record as well, as he said. Each of your lives, that's you trying to evolve. And all of that data about how that happened and the choices you made are recorded, and they're there.
Does the horrible, wretched person eventually become an enlightened person, even after many, many reincarnated lives?
Well, that's the goal, that even the horrible, wretched person will one day turn around and start moving toward love and away from fear. But that's up to them, free will choice. So that is typically what happens, because the system will give that person, the next incarnation will be such that it will be easier for them to succeed.
Or it should be.
Yeah, and so then they'll have a little success, and then you build on that success. So the system is trying to help us succeed because we are part of the system. We're consciousness. The system is consciousness. So as we evolve, it evolves because we're it. It's us. So the system wants us to succeed. So we get the things that we need pretty much when we need them.
What is the difference, Tom, between consciousness and subconsciousness?
Well, there actually is no subconscious if you get rid of fear. That's a little different twist on the Freudian model of mind, and that is that fear is where we create the subconscious to deal with the things that we don't really want to deal with, the things we push below the surface, things that are uncomfortable for us. Those things tend to be in the subconscious. And if you've developed the subconscious, then it becomes that unknown part of your life that just kind of urges you to do things, and you're not quite sure where that comes from.
Or eats away at you.
Or eats away at you. But if you don't have that fear, And if you are love, and when you don't have fear, you are love, by the way. That just is the way that works. At that point, you are a whole person. You understand all of you. You don't have part of you that is hidden from you. You're aware of all of yourself. You're aware of your, of your needs. You're aware of your hunger. You're aware of your sexuality. You're aware of what's going on in your life and who you are. You are authentic. And in that stage, you don't have a subconscious. You have an awareness from top to bottom of who and what you are.
What is the theory of everything?
Well, that is the fundamental model that I published in 2003. It's a theory of consciousness that also turned into a theory of physics. But what it does is it explains everything that is objective. Okay, that would be science, the quantum mechanics and the relativity. And it explains everything that's subjective, and that's a little different. And people kind of have to double take on that. Everything's subjective. That means that your feelings, your situation, the level of your happiness or your misery or pain, all of that has an explanation, why it is you feel that way. And this model then will explain why it is you feel that way. So it explains all the subjective experiences we have. And when I say explains them, it means it hangs it on a logical structure so that it makes sense. We can see where it comes from and why it's like that and where we need to go to change it.
Interesting. This theory that you came up with, was it one of those aha moments for you?
It was a very, very long string of aha moments. It started with Monroe, at Monroe Laboratories. Yeah. I was the physicist there. I worked with Dennis Menerick. He was a double E there, and we were Bob's lab. We made the lab, and we were the guinea pigs in the lab. And I started,
did it all.
Yeah, my purpose was to explain why things happen. Physicist, the theoretician. Dennis was to help design the equipment and, also work with me. But I started doing research there and experiments there. And slowly, I thought I understood how consciousness worked. Then I got the aha moment that understanding consciousness gave me an understanding of physics. So that model just came together over 35 to 40 years of research. And it was based on my experience. When I was working in the non-physical, in the out-of-body state, doing research there, I came up with a set of facts, things that I knew were true for me. This is subjective facts in the world of consciousness. I also am a physicist, so I had a set of facts in the objective world as well that I understood. And I wanted to create a single overarching theory that explained all of those facts. The facts that I had developed in the 30 years of out of body and doing research in consciousness, and all the facts I knew as a physicist. So that's how the model came, and that's why it's a big toe, because it's not a little toe like Einstein worked on. That would just be the objective world. It's the objective and the subjective world.
How much of this is a product of one's imagination, or it's the real deal?
Well, that is an excellent question. You see, when you're in the subjective world, you get information from several sources. One of those is your imagination. We're consciousness. We get to make up information as well. The other is the larger conscious system, or it could be from some other consciousness, because we're all netted in consciousness. All conscious beings are netted. So you never really know for sure which one of those three paths your information's coming from. Your information defines the reality. It could be from any of those. The only way to tell is with a lot of experience. And you need to find things in the consciousness world that you can then verify in the physical world. In other words, things like remote viewing, like healing, all of the paranormal things that people do, precognitive dreams. You have to be able to do enough of this to convince yourself that what you're getting is real. It's not just something that's in your imagination. It doesn't really attach to anything real. So that's what we spent a decade at Monroe Laboratories doing. We spent almost all of our time doing things that were evidential, things that you could then look up later and say, Does this information I got correspond with the information that I know that's here?
Did you uncover things that you didn't expect?
I uncovered lots of things I didn't expect. One of them was that, as a physicist, and particularly a young guy, I was in my 20s when all this started.
Gee, you were a baby.
I was a baby, yeah. I first went out to Monroe Laboratory working with him, and I was like 28 years old.
Good for you, though.
So I had this idea that religion was mostly nonsense, that it was, mostly made out of fearful people who were looking for answers to big questions that didn't have answers. And I discounted it. I was arrogant. Most young physicists, in their 20s are pretty arrogant.
A rebel.
So I had this arrogant attitude. So I thought that religion was mostly nonsense and a lot of belief. And then one of my big things that I didn't expect was that most of what I learned about consciousness and the nature of reality was stuff that people had known for the last, 5,000 years.
Sure.
And, the Buddha said that reality was an illusion. Well, he didn't use the words virtual reality, but it fits perfectly. And sages and people who have explored inner space come to all the same conclusions that I came to as a physicist doing research in the non-physical. It all boiled down to pretty much the same thing. And then I realized that religion, for the most part, was based on fundamental truths. That is the way it is. That's the way the world works. Mm-hmm. But there's also lots of, dogma and creeds and, my God's better than your God sort of thing. There is a lot of nonsense involved in it. But the fundamentals, the basic ideas that are common to most religions are fundamental truth. That is the way it is.
Tom, what exactly is quantum mechanics?
Well, quantum mechanics was actually created because of one experiment, and that was the double slit experiment. And quantum mechanics was invented to explain the results of this experiment. And in this experiment, the results were such that they defied materialism. They defied Newtonian mechanics. So Einstein came to the conclusion, actually got a Nobel Prize for it, that light was a particle. And we had known, scientists had known for almost 100 years that light was a wave. So now there was this discrepancy because particles and waves don't act the same way. So the scientists at that time, now this is like 1915 to 1925, that decade is when most of this took place. They found a way to take light particles, photons, and send them at a barrier that had two slits cut in it, because they knew that if they shined a coherent light on those two slits, they would get what's called a diffraction pattern. There'd be places where there was no light and other places where there was light, because light would go through both the slits, interfere with itself, and make this diffraction pattern. Well, when they put particles through there, particles are just supposed to go through a slit and then hit the screen behind the slit, because that's what particles do.
But not this time.
But not this time. This time, when they just sent the particles through one at a time, those particles rearranged themselves in the same diffraction pattern that a light wave would make. And then, to find out really what was going on at those two slits, they put detectors there so they could tell when a photon went through a slit. And when they did that, the photons just piled up behind the slits like a good particle is supposed to do. Huh. So now they had this problem of when they looked at the data at the slit, they got particle pattern, if you will, piles of particles. And when they didn't, they got a wave, which was the same as, which produced a diffraction pattern. So there was no way to explain that, because you see these particles, Newton told us, we're supposed to travel in a straight line unless acted upon by an external force. It's like Newton's second law. That's so long ago, I'm not sure I got that right, but it's one of
You
Newton's.
were there with Newton,
yeah,
weren't you?
Almost. It was one of Newton's laws, and anyhow, that's not what was happening. There were no external forces on these particles, but yet they weren't traveling in a straight line. They were rearranging themselves in this very particular wave pattern. So quantum mechanics was born to answer that question. How can we understand this? And what they decided was that there really were no particles. There's only probable particles. Particle might be somewhere and might not. So particles only existed as probability.
So they weren't sure.
Yeah, well, they're saying that there are no particles. They're just probability. And if we look at the probability of where these particles go, then we can do the math and look at the probability function, and we get this diffraction pattern. So that was where quantum mechanics was born. And then, of course, in the next 100 years, that was about 100 years ago, they got more and more sophisticated, and quantum mechanics grew and developed. And now it's one of our most productive, most successful theories ever, because it's almost always right. It makes the right predictions.
Tom, you produced a video on how you believe we can change the world.
If you'd like to change the world, if you're tired of all of the greed and abuse, people using people, corporations using their customers and their suppliers and everybody else to accumulate more and more wealth, if you really don't like the self-centeredness and the nastiness that we find here, instead of the love and peace and caring that we'd like to find here, well, the way you go about changing the world is by changing yourself. All the negative things that you see going on in the world that are upsetting to you are symptoms. They're symptoms of a low quality of consciousness. They're symptoms of a high entropy consciousness. Once we understand that this is a virtual reality, once these experiments are done and help verify that this is a virtual reality, once we as a people or as a race understand our purpose as consciousness is to grow up and evolve our quality, then people will begin to change. And as people change, these symptoms of low quality of consciousness will change all by themselves. You see, it's the quality of consciousness that's the problem. Not the dictator, not the president and CEO of the corporation that's abusing people, not the politicians. Those are symptoms of the problem. The problem is low quality of consciousness. Doing these experiments, showing that this is a virtual reality, understanding what that means in terms of who we are and what's important and what's not in terms of growing up and decreasing our entropy, increasing the quality of our consciousness, becoming love, caring about other people. This is what will change the world. If we want to live in a kinder, gentler world, we have to change ourselves first.
I love that picture of those politicians punching each other out. Must have been an emotional meeting, huh? Can we change ourselves, or is this something that is built within us?
Oh, of course we can change ourselves. We can grow up. We can become more. And how we do that is by letting go of our fear. Fear is the problem. As we let go of fear,
The unknown is part of the fear.
yeah, the unknown is part of the fear. People fear the unknown. That's part of it. They're fear of death, and part of that's a fear of the unknown. But they fear all sorts of personal things too. They fear that they are inadequate, that they're not good enough, that they are unlovable, that they need to pretend to be somebody else in order to be liked. So they live in an image rather than being authentic. So we have lots of fears, and those fears inform our choices. And we need to basically take ourselves back, if you will, from those fears. And as we get rid of the fear, life becomes more about others and less about us. Fear is very self-referential.
Right. Why does it seem that when you're born and we develop these different traits, that nobody teaches us this, what you're talking about today? Is this something that we just inherit and pick up? Is it part of our genetic makeup? Or do we really learn it from outside exposure?
Well, the reason that it's so hard to teach is you can't teach somebody how to grow up. You can't teach somebody how to be.
Or to love.
Yeah, or to love. Those things are hard to teach. It's something that you are. It's a matter of being. So you have to change yourself. Nobody else can come in and change you. you can't change anyone else. You make choices, and you do end up growing up one way or another, more or less, based on those choices and the quality of those choices. So if those choices are about caring and love, and it's about other, not about self, then you grow up very positively. If the choices are poor choices, you don't grow up. You stay, full of fear, unhappy, miserable.
What have you concluded, Tom, about humanity? What direction are we headed?
I think that there's a good chance that in the next 2 or 3 or 4 decades, humanity will take a giant step forward in this evolutionary game. Yes. And the reason for that is, for the first time in the history of humanity, all the pieces are in place for us to take a big step forward. Now, we've been evolving all along, and we've had people like the Buddha who understood, what life was about, and not just the Buddha, but religions in general. And we've had that, but it's always been limited in sort of the margins. It's there, but it's margins. Well, now we have the infrastructure called the internet that lets us communicate worldwide very, very quickly. So now these little kind of bubbles of enlightenment that have always been there can coalesce. Also, we have an ability to create empathy with people other than just our family and our neighbors. It used to be that somebody said, 1,000 people were killed in a tsunami or a hurricane on the other side of the world. People go, oh yeah, gee, too bad. But they wouldn't connect to that. Right. Now we get to see them up close and personal.
It's like we're there.
Like we're there. That is enlarging our viewpoint, enlarging our world. So as we grow, the world tends to shrink. We see the humanity in others. We see eyeball to eyeball the things that people are doing. We have a better sense of the kind of reality we're living in. And most people don't find that to be a very good thing. They see that this world is full of fear, it's full of nastiness, it's full of greed, it's full of people out for themselves. How can I use you? And what can I take? And I think most of us feel like that's not good. It's not optimal. It's not really where we need to be. But it won't get into the mainstream until the mainstream, which now it's the scientists. I call the scientists the high priests of Western culture. The high priest's job was to tell the people what was true and what to believe. And if the high priests of Western culture say, yea, verily, this is a virtual reality, then that will start a ball rolling that logically will start out as this reality is information-based to love is the answer. There is a logical connection from one of those to the other. It'll take us probably more time than we have here to go through that. But if that happens and the high priests put us into the mainstream with that concept of what we're here to do is grow up, become love, then people who are fed up with greed and avarice will begin to see a better way. This idea of a virtual reality, this idea that I have in my big toe, it's very inclusive. Everybody can be a part of it. It's not something you have to believe. Matter of fact, I say belief is a problem. Ego and belief are problems. Always be skeptical. But it's something that opposites can find themselves in. In other words, if you're an atheist, you can look at the my big toe and you can say, I knew it all along. There's no God, but there's this larger consciousness system that does all the things that people in religion say that God does. And if you're a theist, you can say, I knew it all along. This larger consciousness system, that's God. So people from all sides can find a logical structure that they can hang their own experience on. And when that happens, I think we'll have some bigger steps made as far as our growing up goes.
If we don't accept it, if we don't learn it, what happens to us?
We get to try again. We get to keep trying and keep working on it until we do get it.
So we get that second or third chance.
Yes, and we will get as many chances as we need, because we're talking about is evolution. It's the evolution of consciousness toward lower entropy states, toward becoming love. And evolution may be very slow, but evolution is relentless. Evolution just keeps the pressure up, just keeps pushing until it succeeds. That's the nature of evolution. We evolve into those states that are more profitable, and being kind and considerate and caring makes a more profitable social system.
Tom, thanks for being on Beyond Belief.
Thank you.
He was a 20-something-year-old person working with Robert Monroe at the Monroe Institute and learned about consciousness, out-of-body experiences, and has learned one major thing, that humanity can change for the better. I'm George Norrie, and thanks for watching Beyond Belief.